My childhood was spent in the vast flat land of North Dakota. In high school, my friends and I had a strange hobby, researching unsolved murders that occurred out in the county. We would then venture out at night to find the scenes and film our exploration. It was something to do while getting wasted on cheap beer, typical of teenage years. Eventually, we ran out of places to visit and became experts at finding abandoned rural farmsteads by driving down dirt roads and looking for telltale signs like rutted paths, deliberate tree groves, and old mailbox posts. On one particular night, we were out searching when we came upon a tree grove that seemed out of place. Ignoring any fear or hesitation, we drove through the field and discovered an old house, not too aged but definitely neglected. Padlocks on the outside doors were easily knocked off, and we eagerly entered the kitchen with our flashlights. There were 6 of us in total, all huddled together as we illuminated the kitchen/dining area. The first thing that caught our attention was the table. It looked strangely normal, set for a meal with every item placed neatly in its proper spot. This was unusual because we had been in dozens of abandoned houses before, and none had ever been set up like this. As we continued to explore the area, we found the fridge still contained disgusting remnants from a full stock, and the cupboards were surprisingly filled with canned dry foods. This was yet another unexpected discovery. Usually these houses were completely empty by now. One of my friends found mail on the counter dated early June 1978, while another stumbled upon a creepy TV guide in the living room with UFOs on the cover. And perhaps the most unsettling part was that all of the family photos were still hanging on the walls: mom, dad, brother, sister, frozen in time from their 1970s glory days. The furniture, although covered in a layer of dust, was surprisingly well preserved. The closets were packed full with various items, giving the impression that this house had been lived in not too long ago. As we continued to explore the abandoned house, it became clear that this was not a planned move-out, but rather an abrupt and unplanned departure. It was as if the owners simply locked the door and never returned. We made our way upstairs, splitting into 3 pairs to investigate the 3 bedrooms. Our group headed towards the closest room, which turned out to be the younger boy's room based on its contents. I cannot fully describe what the room looked like because, before we could even step inside, we were jolted by a blood-curdling scream coming from down the hall. We all ran towards the source of the scream, shouting questions at each other in a frenzy. After what felt like an eternity, the 2 screamers finally caught their breath and explained what they saw. Their words sent shivers down our spines as they urged us to see for ourselves. As we cautiously walked down the hallway and entered the room, I couldn't help but pray that I wouldn't embarrass myself in front of my friends by acting like a scared puppy. However, to my relief, I realized that they were just as terrified as I was. The room itself was dimly lit by our flashlights, but it was enough to reveal a queen-size bed against the left wall, with a porcelain doll positioned upright on top of the blankets. Its eerie snow-white skin contrasted against its jet-black hair cascading down its shoulders, but what held our gaze were its cold, dead eyes that seemed to follow our every move. It was as if this life-size doll was waiting for us in that room, its porcelain features painted with permanent stillness, and its dead eyes illuminated by our flashlights. It was a haunting sight that would stay with us for a long time. As I walked in, the air was thick with an unsettling stillness. It felt as though something or someone were waiting, watching me. My eyes were immediately drawn to the head that had been turned, facing directly towards me. It seemed almost expectant, like it had been waiting for my arrival for the past 20 years. Memories flooded back of hasty exits down those creaky stairs and into our car, desperate to leave this place behind. But during the car ride, a feeling of dread and unease crept over us. We realized that even though the house had been abandoned, someone had taken the time to set up that goddamn doll. They hadn't bothered to pack food, clothes, or family photos, just this creepy doll. It became clear that setting up the doll must have been one of the last things done in this house before its former inhabitants left. We tried to research their names but found nothing. No tragic accidents, No grisly massacres, no extended family. Just a tacky time capsule in the middle of nowhere. Our only lead was discovering that the county had taken possession of the land due to non-payment of taxes. But even that didn't explain why they had left in such a hurry, or who would go through the trouble of setting up such a disturbing scene. We couldn't find any more information on what happened to them or why they left that king doll behind to hound anyone who dared enter their abandoned home. The only thing we could do was leave and hope to never encounter something like that again. At just 14 years old, I was entrusted with the responsibility of babysitting my 3 younger cousins, ages 8, 4, and 1, in a remote, rugged area of rural North Carolina. My aunt and uncle had to attend a wedding over an hour away and wouldn't be home until very late. Their house was perched precariously on a steep mountainside, with a back deck that dropped 15 feet onto a rocky hill leading down to a river below. The nearest neighbors were half a mile away, and the closest main road was a full mile away. At night, there were no lights to be seen in any direction. This was truly the middle of nowhere. You had to know exactly where you were going to end up at their house. Upon leaving, my aunt and uncle had left us with some pizza for dinner and their cell phone number next to the landline. This was in the early 2000s, so I didn't have a cell phone. But even if I did, I wouldn't have gotten reception out there anyway. As soon as they left, the baby fell asleep in her crib while the 4-year-old cozied up on the couch watching TV. He wasn't feeling well, so he drifted off quietly. Meanwhile, the 8-year-old and I were jamming out to Guitar Hero in the loft upstairs. From our vantage point, above the living room, I could easily keep an eye on the youngest child, while also glancing out the massive window that overlooked the driveway leading up to the house. The description of this driveway is crucial to understanding how isolated their home really was. The slim road that led all the way up to their forked driveway came straight from a dead-end street. It was clear that you had reached your destination once you arrived at their house. There was no chance of accidentally ending up there. As you turned into the driveway, the house loomed ahead, surrounded by towering trees. To the left was an open carport, where my aunt, uncle, or any visiting relatives would park their cars. The right driveway led down a short but steep hill, ending at a large flat area next to the garage door that opened up into the basement of the house. Though it was meant to be a garage, it had been transformed into my uncle's man cave, his personal sanctuary. Next to the garage door was a normal-sized door with a small window that allowed you to see inside. This driveway, however, served a different purpose for us kids. It was our designated play area. Nestled on a mountainside, there wasn't much space for safe play, but this flat stretch of land provided the perfect spot. No cars ever drove down here. There were too many bikes and toys scattered around. Friends and family knew this and respected it. It was now 10 o'clock at night and darkness had engulfed the outside world. There was no moon to illuminate the area, just pitch blackness. Yet my cousin and I were still immersed in our game of Guitar Hero, when suddenly, headlights caught my eye. But these weren't just any headlights. They belonged to a massive truck with roof lights commonly found on Jeeps or other off-road vehicles. And to my shock and fear, the truck was making its way down the right driveway towards our play area. This was not my aunt or uncle's vehicle. We did not know who it belonged to. Panic and dread flooded my body as I realized someone was trespassing on our private space. I was a small teenage girl, alone in an isolated house atop a dark mountain at night. The only sounds were the quiet breathing of the 3 children in my care and the occasional creak of the old house settling. My voice trembled as I asked my cousin, "Who is that? Do you know whose truck that is?" His panicked expression mirrored mine as he replied, "No, I've never seen that truck before." Ushering him downstairs, I still felt unsure of what to do. The 2 little ones were sleeping down there, and I wanted to make sure they were safe. As I checked on the baby, I grabbed the phone to call 911. Suddenly, I heard a loud banging against the metal garage door. It was being shaken violently, as if someone was trying to break in. Panic flooded through me as I realized that no one ever opened that door. It was always sealed shut. My fear increased when I heard them try the door beside it. the metal doorknob jiggling frantically. They weren't just knocking to see if my uncle was down there. They were trying to get inside. And with the lights out, it was pitch black down there and they knew no one was home. It was clear at this point that they were definitely breaking in. The door leading to the basement steps was right next to the phone, so I could hear everything clearly as it happened. In a moment of desperation, I quickly turned the little lock on the doorknob. Just in case they made it into the basement, my heart felt like it was going to burst out of my chest as I continued talking to the dispatcher, my 8-year-old cousin clinging to my arm for comfort. The operator tried to calm me down and reassured me that help was on the way, but deep down I knew it would be at least 30 minutes until a police officer could make it all the way up here. Assuming, of course, that they didn't get lost on this treacherous mountainside in the pitch dark. All I could do was pray and hope for the best, but as each second passed, I couldn't shake off the feeling that we were in grave danger. My heart raced as the operator on the other end of the line asked for my aunt and uncle's number. I scrambled to locate the slip of paper with their contact information, feeling a sense of urgency and dread clawing at my chest. As I turned around, my blood ran cold at the sight of a man peering in through the large sliding glass door. He was huge and burly, easily standing at 6'4" with long, scraggly red hair and a bushy beard that seemed to engulf his face in an ominous red cloud. His grin sent shivers down my spine, a twisted expression that still haunts me to this day. To make matters worse, there was another man behind him, though I could barely see him through the blurred glass. From what little I could make out, he appeared just as tall but more lanky than the red-haired man at the door. My hand shook so hard that I struggled to hold on to the phone as I frantically dialed 911, my eyes fixed on the intruder outside. But before the operator could even speak, my 8-year-old cousin piped up from behind me. "Mr. Jim." His voice sounded confused, almost uncertain. It wasn't a tone of relief or happiness upon seeing our neighbor, who we were supposed to be staying with while our parents were away. "Do you know who that is?" I asked my cousin urgently, fear pulsing through every fiber of my being. Before he could answer, I turned back to face the man at the door and shouted into the phone, "I'm on the phone with the police," grateful that the sliding glass door was at least closed, though whether it was locked or not, I couldn't remember in that moment. The man outside stared at me for a moment, his eyebrows furrowed as if he were considering his next move. The uncertainty only added to the terror coursing through my veins, wondering what this strange man wanted, and if we were in danger. The man backed away into the darkness, his figure disappearing into the shadows. It felt like an eternity until I saw the truck lights reverse out of the driveway and continue down the road until they disappeared from sight. My cousin and I were both still trembling with fear, having only met this guy a handful of times, an acquaintance of my cousin's dad. He wasn't someone we knew well or trusted, and it was clear he had made a grave error by pulling into our driveway, reserved for visitors who never come that way. I quickly called 911 and gave them a description of the man before they assured me that they had contacted my aunt and uncle, and they would be returning home soon. The operator stayed on the line with me until a police officer arrived to ensure that the men were gone. They stayed with us until my aunt and uncle got home, asking us questions about the intruders. My uncle was livid, not at me for calling them home early, but at this Mr. Jim character. He muttered something about beating him up if he ever saw him again. My aunt was also angry, scolding my uncle for his drug problem, which I didn't know about at the time. I shuddered to think what Mr. Jim and his accomplice could have done if I hadn't been on the phone with the police. But that sinister grin I saw on his face was not a friendly one. He must have known my uncle wasn't there, because the basement was completely dark and you could see through the windowed door. And when he attempted to lift the garage door, it was clear he had malicious intentions, something even my troubled uncle wouldn't do. The thought nagged at the back of my mind as I watched him fidget with the lock, sweat beading on his forehead. He was determined to break into the basement. There was no doubt in my mind. The way he held the crowbar in his hand, knuckles white from tension, spoke volumes, and as he finally managed to force open the door, I knew that there was no other explanation for his actions. I never did babysit for them again after that night, and the memory of it made me shudder. The dark, eerie basement held secrets and dangers that I didn't want to know about. It's safe to say that I never went back up there willingly.